Hey guys, it's Ben here with the Half-Court Heave podcast. I'm here with Isaac and Arjun. We're back again. It's been a little bit too long. But anyways, let's just get straight into it. But before I have it on under my Hornets jersey because it's draft day. We're recording on draft day. And I mean, if this comes out and then the stuff we talked about in the NBA isn't still necessary to talk about, like it's not still relevant, you can't blame us because we didn't know. We recorded this in the past. But anyways, go ahead and get your merch. It's in our bio. It's in the YouTube bio. It's in the YouTube video bio right now. And if you want to go to any topic that is in the future that was promoted on the Instagram, just click the downward button next to the title, and you can click on any time to go to any topic there is. And then go ahead and like and subscribe so we can keep on putting out more content for you guys. But without further ado, let's get straight into it. Let's talk about these Lakers and DeMar DeRozan. And the first question I got to ask you guys is, should the Lakers avoid trading for DeMar DeRozan? Arshun, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start this one off. DeMar DeRozan isn't really a guy who I think would fit in the Lakers system because you don't need, you already have two first-team All-NBA players. You have the scoring. What you need are shooters, reliable shooters, so that when Braun drives, he can kick it out to someone. DeMar can't shoot. No, he's got a great jump shot, but he can't shoot that three ball, or he just doesn't want to. Pretty much, I just think that what the Lakers need is to keep getting their young pieces. If you trade for DeMar, you're going to give it more and more of your draft picks. Right now, you've already sacrificed a lot of your future. So at this point, don't trade any more draft picks.
All right, yeah, I agree with you. I don't think they should pick up DeMar. Obviously, DeMar DeRozan, he's not going to hurt your team. Trading for DeMar DeRozan's not going to negatively impact your team. He's not Russell Westbrook like that. But, obviously, this team's, the problems they need to address, the few problems they do have, don't involve DeMar DeRozan at all. I mean, the guy, he is an all-star caliber player. He put up some of the best stats of his career last season in San Antonio. But when it comes to their problems, they need to address the three-point shooting around Braun and AD so Braun can kick that ball out. And they just traded Danny Green, and as much as we love to meme Danny Green was a great three-point shooter for that team when he was there. And now, Dennis Schroeder's probably their number one three-point shooter. But let's look at DeMar DeRozan's three-point shooting. Last year, in the 2020 season, DeMar DeRozan made 9 3-pointers, and he shot 25% on his three-pointers. And in 2019, he made 7 and was 15% from 3. Now, I get that he shoots from different places on the floor. He's a mid-range shooter. He's a mid-range scorer. He doesn't shoot threes, but your problems aren't to address the mid-range shot. It's to address the three-point shot so that Braun can have people to kick out to. I don't think you need to get DeMar DeRozan for his name value like Lakers fans do want name value like DeMar DeRozan. They would appreciate that. But I think you just need to get role players like Joe Harris, guys who can shoot that rock around LeBron James, around Anthony Davis, so they can have people they can rely on. But Isaac, what do you think?
Also, you don't want to do that in terms of contract. He has too big of a contract that you want to take on, and he just accepted to stay with San Antonio. So you would also have to trade a guy like Kyle Kuzma, who's your future and probably draft picks. And they've already lost a lot of draft picks to get Anthony Davis last year. So I think that's just not a good idea. His contract's not good, and they really can't afford to lose anyone else. They're going to have to pick up people in free agency. They can't afford to lose someone like Kyle Kuzma or any of the few assets that they still have.
Yeah, and to make the deal work, since he did accept his $27 million option to stay on a roster where he could have just been a free agent signed with the Lakers, they would need to sign and trade KCP to probably a $15 million deal, plus add in Kuzma, and then you're giving up KCP, who, if you re-sign him right now, is your primary catch-and-shoot guy. And then also Kuzma, who's your primary probably trade asset guy, because he is very valuable. As much as, again, we like to joke about Kyle Kuzma on here, he's also a very valuable asset to that team. So when it comes to trading for DeMar DeRozan, he's one hell of a player. I'm not saying that he's drastically overpaid at $27 million, but if you get him, you can't bring back Avery Bradley, you can't bring back Dwight Howard, you can't bring back the valuable assets that won you this championship essentially besides LeBron James. And I think that's very critical to this team trying to repeat with how much teams are stacking up, like the Bucks, like the Nets, stacking up so that they can compete for the championship just as much as the Lakers are. But Arjun, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I'm in agree with all of you guys. This is pretty much I think we have a consensus agreement on this topic, Ben.
Also, the Lakers are going to need to be deeper. Like you said, like other teams like the Nets are going to be really deep this year. The Bucks are getting deeper. Teams in the West are trying to like deepen their bench. The Lakers are already talking about giving up like Rondo. Rondo is going to be a free agent. You said KCP can be a free agent.
And they've been saying that it's increasingly likely that Rondo is not going to return. That's what the Lakers believe in their front office, is that Rondo's good as gone right now. So you're losing your point guard, especially playoff Rondo, which is very valuable to this team. And you lost Danny Green. You're losing KCP and Kuzma. And that's basically all of their depth that they had before, besides like Caruso and Markieff Morris, and of course Dwight Howard, Avery Bradley, these guys that are free agents that they won't be able to re-sign if they get DeRozan. But anyways, I want to talk about something else now. This is one of the things that might not be relevant tomorrow when this is up on YouTube, but let's talk about which teams should and will make a push for Russell Westbrook. Isaac, what do you have to say about this?
I think this is, I don't know where I stand on this. It really depends what the Rockets are going to do. I think the Rockets at this point are blowing up their team. I don't think, especially at least one of their stars is going to go. I think both of them are going to go, James Harden and Russell Westbrook. I'm going to go with the Charlotte Hornets. I mean, I don't think this is such a good move for the Hornets at all in any sense. But like people are saying, the Hornets never seem to really change each year. When they lost Kemba, they were like still the 9th seed. Like they're really just kind of staying the same. And I don't think this is a great move for them, but I don't trust Jordan to not make a bad move. And I think it would fit in perfectly with what Russell Westbrook was saying. He was saying he wanted to go back to the system. He had an OKC where he could be ball dominant, where he could take a ton of shots, he could get all of his stats. And he can do that with the Hornets. So I think that's where he's going to land. He might get the Knicks, but I doubt it.
So obviously, I think the Knicks are too stubborn to make this deal. Before I thought they were too stubborn to not make this deal, but now I think they are too stubborn, too stupid to not make this deal, because they will think they're giving up too much or something about with the Knicks. They'll always fuck up. But of course, the teams that would go after them are the Hornets, the Magic, the Knicks, the Pistons. Those are the teams that are primarily targeting him. And then I do have some trades. I mean, there's nothing really to say because, I mean, you guys know my stance on Russell Westbrook. I don't think he's winning material. I don't think many people do think he's winning material. But some trades to go through. I hope he doesn't go to the Hornets. But for the Hornets, it would be Terry Rozier, Malik Monk, Cody Zeller, and a protected first-round pick. This would get it done with the current Russell Westbrook value that is steep to an all-time low, which I credit the general managers pursuing Russell Westbrook, that they've been waiting this long to pull the trigger so that they can lower his value alongside his bad contract and his requesting a trade, which really lowered his value. But I think that would get it done. Of course, it's little for his talent, but it would probably get the deal done. And then for the Magic, Terrence Ross, Markelle Fultz, Mo Bamba, and Kem Birch for Russell Westbrook. I do think they're giving up a little much for Russell Westbrook, but to get it done, that's probably what they would have to do contract-wise without giving up Nikola Vucevic. And then for the Knicks, Frank Ntilikina, Kevin Knox, Julius Randle, and Taj Gibson for Russell Westbrook. I don't think there's a pick in there because they're giving up two pretty young guys that have potential. I'm not saying it's great potential, but it's better than what Russell Westbrook is doing for this team right now. And then for the Pistons, Blake Griffin, I'm not going to pronounce that, Luke Kennard, and a protected first-round pick for Russell Westbrook. I think that gets it done. You get some young assets in there. The Blake Griffin contract is fishy, but hey, you do what you got to do. But Arjun, what do you think about this?
Okay, so I think we have aligning views on Russell Westbrook because you do also need to take into the fact that he does do well on these teams where he's ball dominant. He took a pretty bad Thunder team to a 6th seed in the playoffs, which was really impressive. So you want a team like that. So I actually chose the Magic along with that. I would say Aminu, Ross, and Fournier, and maybe a lottery protected pick, maybe a 2nd-round pick just to throw in there for Russell Westbrook. That could do it. And then I was thinking about this. I don't know if I was thinking about this, but the Pacers. I was thinking maybe the Pacers. Maybe it depends on if you want to structure your team around. If you want to keep Brogdon at the center, at like the point guard, you want to have him at the shooting guard role. But I mean, I'm looking at those teams that are at the 8th seed, the 9th seed. Isaac, you said the Hornets earlier. The Hornets have a breadth. They're not like stuck at what they are. They have Bridges, but mainly PJ Washington and Devontae Graham, Terry Rozier. Those are guys who can take them. So They shouldn't mess with they should not bring Russell Westbrook in there because I think if you blow up the young core, it's over.
Yeah, I don't think Isaac said to bring him in there, but I think Michael Jordan is Michael Jordan, and he obviously would do that deal. He's been trying to make the Hornets general manager Mitch Kupchak try to do that deal for like a week, and he still hasn't pulled it off. Which respect to Mitch. Respect to Mitch.
One more thing, like look at the comparison between Russell Westbrook and James Harden. Like right now, James Harden is looking to go to a contending team, and in that position, he's willing to take a step back to win a championship. Russell Westbrook is talking about going back to being ball dominant OKC, going back to all the teams that you listed are teams that are at the bottom of the league right now, So, I mean, I just think at this point, like, James Harden, the teams that they looked at for James Harden is like the Nets, the Sixers. Those are teams that are contending for a championship right now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's just a huge difference between those players.
But yeah, I do want to talk about something else, and you did put us a pretty good guide into that, which is talking about James Harden. And do you guys think that James Harden to the Nets, depending on what they give up, solidifies them as your title favorites next season? Isaac, you want to start this one off?
Hold on 1 second. You guys start.
No. Okay, all right. So I do think that this solidifies them as the public title champions because, of course, I mean, we haven't seen a team. I mean, have we actually seen a team this talented? I don't think so. When you look at purely talent, you don't look at chemistry, you don't look at like ISOs, you don't look at anything like that. You just look at pure talent in that big three. There's never been a big three that talented. You get James Harden, who has been contending for the MVP since he's gotten in Houston, basically. You have KD and Kyrie, who are notoriously known as two of the most talented players of all time. And then KD and James Harden known as the two of the best scorers of all time. And I mean, putting those three together, you got to think that team's going to win a championship. Are they my favorites to be a great team and like win a championship together? I don't know. Like that talent, obviously, the talent coming together, people want to make the argument that, three ball dominant players, they can't win a championship together. But like, no chemistry, no anything, nothing can really stop that much talent on a team, I don't think. But also there's LeBron James. Like, and I also do think it's funny that they have to pair up these three players just to beat a 38-year-old LeBron James. But going back to my point, I do think that I can probably put them as my East favorites over the Bucks in 7 or 6, depending on how this team meshes together if they make that deal. But I'm not sure if I can put them over the Lakers yet with, of course, like all the issues that team could have on the court with trying to get KD and Kyrie to play corner, like catch and shoot roles, which I don't know if that'll work. But if it does, that team's obviously winning a championship. You can't deny that. Isaac, what do you think?
Yeah, I think they're totally the favorites. But it also depends what they're giving up because they do have a really deep bench. I think it's a better move for them not to get Harden because there's too much potential for it not to work out. I think they might not mesh very well as players. And if you're giving up a ton of guys in your bench that could fill in around KD and Kyrie really well, like good shooters, good guys on the bench to let them rest when they're tired so they can play good minutes instead of having to like stretch out the whole game. That could be risky for them. But if either way, unless they're giving up their entire team, Harden is of course going to put them at my title favorites right now in the East and the West. I think, especially because we just talked about in the last segment, like the Lakers are losing a lot of their pieces. So the Lakers are already losing a lot of their pieces. So I think like when you compare those two teams, the Nets will still be deeper. Even if they give up more players for Harden, they'll still be deeper. And they have those three superstars. They can totally beat LeBron.
Yeah, and I mean, like, going back to what I said before, just saying it again, like, when you have, like, of course, like, talent can be outruled by things like these three being ball dominant. We saw that with Russell Westbrook and James Harden in Houston. Like, obviously, you pair up two players that talented, and you go, damn, okay, how did they not win a championship? They're so talented and they work together. But like it's the on the court presence. Like obviously these guys are friends, but like on the court, can these three ball dominant guys work together? But like with this much talent, we've never seen it. The closest we've seen was the Warriors in 2016 when they got Kevin Durant. But like you're Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving. Assuming KD comes back to what he used to be, nothing can stop that team. No sort of on or off court thing I think can stop that team. But if it does, that's my one scary thing. And also LeBron James and Anthony Davis coming out of the West hungry for a second ring is obviously scary to any team, even if it's an all-star team. But Arjun, what do you think?
Yeah.
Damn, I mean, this is a team where like Isaac said, I do see it in a way why you're saying you don't want to pursue Harden, even though it depends on what your stances are, the Nets, because I think it's a guarantee. I honestly think it's a guaranteed championship. I don't care about chemistry at all. It is a guaranteed championship in their first year. Now, after they win, if they lose, in my personal opinion, if they lose and don't win a championship, the team's going to explode. Because we all know KD. I mean, KD isn't even. We don't even know if he's going to come back. I mean, he could have an injury. He is injury prone right now. I think this injury really made him injury prone.
That, of course, like I've said this a billion times since we started talking about KD again, was that this is the injury that only Dominique has came back from. Like, of course, I believe in KD. I don't have any doubt KD will be his same self. But like at the end of the day, that is something that very well could be happening. Is that Kevin Durant will come back and be like 70% of himself, which will still be an all-star, but it won't be Kevin Durant as we know him.
Yeah. I just don't see this kind of a team sticking around because, like you guys said, there's just so much talent put together. 3 ISO, you could have an ISO for Kyrie, you wouldn't play. ISO for KD. These are all isolation players, and as much as talent as they have, I just don't see them sticking around for that long. Maybe they win one championship. I just don't see them sticking around. I think there'll be some kind of extreme blow up by some point. But if you're the Nets, go ahead and do it. You would need a championship. You guys haven't had I don't even know if they've won a ring yet, honestly.
But I do think, before we move on, I do want to say, I think it'll be interesting in the regular season how they could do a load management where just one of them takes a break every other game and the other two just ISO. I think that would be fun. Like, of course, fans wouldn't want to see it. Fans want to go and they want to see all 3 of them playing together. But, like, if they just, like, took breaks or, like, they, like...
How would that work with all of them playing together at once? Because they're going to want that for the playoffs.
Yeah, no, I'm kidding. But, like, that would be...
Yeah, I mean, sure.
It would be weird to see if that team does happen, which I do doubt it will. I think he's going to the Sixers. That's my best belief. If they can get Ben Simmons and keep Ben Simmons and still get James Harden, that'll be amazing. But anyways, I do want to talk about something else. This was a move made the other night per Woj. We got the Bucks. They traded for Bojan Bogdanovic and Jrue Holiday, and they gave up a lot of assets. That was very controversial at the time. They gave up 3 first-round picks for Holiday, and you guys know the rest of the trades, and people listening know the rest of the trades. But generally, do you guys think they gave up too much? Arjun, what do you think?
It's not just the fact that they gave up 3 picks. It's the fact that they gave up 3 unprotected first-round picks for Jrue Holiday, who has value, but you're giving up Eric Bledsoe, who is still he's one of the best two-way guards. When getting Jrue Holiday, you're getting an upgrade on defense and an upgrade in scoring. You're giving him George Hill, who's been like 35 for like 10 years. I mean, he's been old. He's managed. I mean, it's impressive that he's still putting up good production. But, I mean, we're talking about 3 first-round picks here. That's your future. I know Giannis is your future, but that's way too much for Jrue Holiday.
No. Arjun, let me stop you there because you're saying that it's too much because you're giving up these unprotected picks. But, I mean, it's not just the sake of getting a player like Jrue Holiday. Like, obviously, getting a player like Jrue Holiday is pretty good, and of course, he's going to be expensive, and you think it's a little too much to give up for Jrue Holiday because you don't think he's worth that much. That's like a superstar kind of trade. But it's not just for Jrue Holiday. This trade, they acquired Giannis in a way. Like I think they said that Giannis approved these deals. He had to approve these deals because they need Giannis. I mean, these first round picks, say Giannis walks and they kept those first round picks, they didn't trade for Jrue Holiday. Would any of those guys be Giannis Antetokounmpo? No, they wouldn't be him. And that's why I think that it's not too much at all. I mean, you let Giannis dictate this team, and if he runs you into the ground, he did it himself, and he's going to stay because he's going to sign that supermax. And I think that's the whole purpose was also, it wasn't like that bad of a deal. Like, you gave up Eric Bledsoe, and you got one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA who can also give you 20 a night if he's a number 2 option. He did it, and he was like the number 3 option in New Orleans. But now you give that guy to Giannis Antetokounmpo, that's going to be, man, that team is going to be a historically great defensive team. They added, and then Bogdan Bogdanovic, they gave up Dante DiVincenzo, Ersan Ilyasova. That was not too much for Bogdan Bogdanovic. That was a perfect deal. And you got him off the bench. He will be, or he might even be starting, but I think that'll be great for them. I don't think this is too much at all because it was at the sake of keeping the best player in the NBA. But Isaac, what do you think?
Yeah, also, it's going to be really good for the Pelicans. They're going to get, I think George Hill is being sent to the Pelicans. They're going to get, is it George Hill and Eric Bledsoe are going to the Pelicans, right?
Yeah, and picks.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a great deal for them. But I think it works well on both sides. Like, I agree with Arjun, it might be too much, but I'm going to totally side with Ben here because Giannis, you're talking about Giannis leaving. They can't have him leave. This is the last push. This is the push to keep him on your team and prove to him that you can be a title contender and give him pieces to help him win a championship. That's exactly what he wants.
Because also, like, getting a player like Giannis and, like, having a player like Giannis is so valuable because you're not going to get another Giannis, and then you're also going to have to play another Giannis, but also you're in Milwaukee. Nobody's going to come to Milwaukee. So the odds are that you could draft the first overall pick for 3 straight years and just get, like, all-star caliber players. But, like, you're Milwaukee, you're not going to get a player like Giannis back in free agency ever. Nobody's going to want to move to Milwaukee. I'm sorry, Milwaukee fans. I'm sorry, people who live in Milwaukee. Nobody's going to want to move to Milwaukee on their own will. Giannis wants to be in Milwaukee.
Okay. Wait. I literally have, like, breaking news right now. The Sixers traded Al Horford and a first and second round pick to the Thunder for Danny Green. The Sixers just got rid of that Danny Green contract.
Well, no, they got rid of the Al Horford, but they gave up a pick for Danny Green. Okay, breaking news. I'll put it on the screen when I edit this later.
Okay, but also, okay, just to talk about that really quick, that seems like it's clearing up cap space for James Harden. I'm just putting that out there because that move is clearly to just get rid of cap space because there's no way they think Al Horford.
And I guess.
Oh, guys, yeah, that's crazy. But I want to go back to our original topic because first of all, you think that if the Bucks offered them at least two first round picks that are one first round, say unprotected, one lottery protected, Jrue Holiday, no, Eric Bledsoe and George Hill for Jrue Holiday, you think that the Pelicans wouldn't accept that?
They probably didn't. Do you think they originally? Do you think that they went in that room and automatically just offered Eric Bledsoe and 3 picks? No, they built their way up there. That's why the Celtics offered Gordon Hayward and 3 picks for Jrue Holiday, and they rejected it because this team wanted a lot for Jrue Holiday, and they were like, you know what? That's who Giannis wants. CP3's off the board. All these guys are off the board. I need to get Jrue Holiday, or else Giannis Antetokounmpo, the best player in the NBA who's young and wants to be here, will leave if I don't get this guy. But anyways, let's talk about our last thing in the NBA that we're going to talk about today. And it's, do you guys think that these new CP3 Suns are contenders in the West? Isaac, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think they're totally contenders right now. I think it's a great addition to their team. They were able to, again, it's another example of like showing your star player that you can put pieces around him to win a championship. Those 3 with DeAndre Ayton, they're going to be good in the West. And I think their chemistry matches up so well. And when you add CP3 to any team, you're adding a veteran guy who can help your young players come together. And you saw that their team was actually pretty deep without DeAndre Ayton when they went 8-0 in the bubble. That's very impressive. Adding CP3 to that team may not be like the most top-heavy team in the West. When you look at other guys, like the Clippers are adding people, the Lakers are very top heavy. You have a lot of teams with stars in the West, but they're going to be really good next year. And I think they're going to have very good chemistry.
And
you bring them together.
You could argue that they gave up too much, giving away Oubre and Rubio and Ty Jerome and picks. But I mean, when you look at it, they did clear up a lot of cap room in that deal, so that now they can bring back Aaron Baines, who's arguably the best backup center in the NBA. You can bring him back. I think there's somebody else that they can bring back that's supposed to be a free agent for them this offseason, and they'll have room for a mid-level exception to sign somebody to fill in that forward gap that Kelly Oubre played before. So they'll have a lot of potential. And they also have a decent bench. They don't have a great bench, but they have a pretty decent bench. They have Mikal Bridges. I think he's their starting small forward as of now. But this team right now is going to be very good. I do think they'll contend for a championship in the West, but they'll have a very clear timestamp. I wouldn't be surprised if the Suns make way more, or not way more, but some more moves so they can make this a very, very win-now team because they know that Chris Paul probably has 1 or 2 years left in the tank of playing all-star level basketball, or however many he has of playing basketball, period. But I think that this team will contend for a championship in the West. I don't have a question for that. Like, of course, the Lakers and the Clippers are better teams than them, but obviously they're not my title favorites. I just think that they will go somewhere in the playoffs. Not saying they're going to the finals, but I'm really excited to see this team play basketball. June, what do you think?
Look, as good of an addition Chris Paul is, their roster right now, I don't see them being better than the Lakers in regular season. I don't see them being better than the Clippers in the regular season. I don't see them being better than the Warriors in the regular season. I don't see them being better than the Nuggets in the regular season. They're going to be a fifth or fourth seed in the playoffs. Do I think they're going to contend? No, I don't think they're going to contend. I think they're going to. The West is just too deep at this moment. That's why I talked about it earlier. That I think this was a great addition, but the Suns should focus more on the future when those teams start to get old and expired, like the Clippers and the Lakers. Right now, the West is
no. We talked about this. We talked about this in the other episode. I think it was last episode. Was that you need to if you don't want Devin Booker to leave because he's been real patient with those Suns Suns front office. You need to go and do something, even if it was a questionable deal, giving up a lot of assets like Ricky Rubio, Kelly Oubre. Those are a lot of valuable assets, especially for this current Chris Paul. But you need it. It's kind of like the Giannis situation where you need to prove that you were all in on him.
Okay, I get that. Okay, that was a good move. I said that was a good move. That was just my personal. That's a good move, getting Chris Paul, because now it shows you're all in. But they're not going to contend. They're going to be a fifth or fourth seed. And that's just not contending, in my opinion. That's being a solid team. Maybe in the future, they're probably going to contend for a championship in a couple of years. But right now, they're not going to contend.
Chris Paul is a historically very, very good playoff player. You take him in the second round with Devin Booker playing at his best, as we saw in the bubble. And then say they can't take that Lakers team to 6 games, especially with developing with how much they get on their bench, like determining how much they do get on their bench in the end of the day. Say that team can't take them to 6 or 7 games. I call that contending, especially since they'll have to play them in the second round, since they'll probably be a 4th or 5th seed. But also, if they play the Clippers,
top team in that conference, and they're not a top team in that conference.
If they play the Clippers in the second round, I got the Suns. I'm just saying it right now. Unless they get like a really ball dominant or like a really good playmaking point guard, I got the Suns in that series. But anyways,
also they're adding Chris Paul, and they didn't have DeAndre Ayton when they went 8-0 in the bubble. I know that's not necessarily going to stay, but Devin Booker is really hot right now, and he's going to make a great addition to their team. Also with DeAndre Ayton, if he doesn't, get suspended.
No, but DeAndre Ayton will also develop, and Devin Booker will develop, and they'll go alongside Chris Paul, and just that pick and roll will be crazy. But let's go ahead and let's talk about our NFL for today. We won't talk about the Al Horford, Danny Green move because I'm sure the Sixers will make more moves by the next time we make an episode. But let's talk about the NFL. Let's talk about, do you guys think that DK Metcalf is a top 5 receiver yet? Or June, what about you cap us off with the NFL?
Actually, Ben, I want you to start with this one.
You want me to start? Okay. So, DK Metcalf. He's kind of like, he reminds me of LeBron from the standpoint where, like, sometimes, like, I'll see LeBron. Like, if I'm playing 2K, honestly, like, I'll say this honestly. If I'm playing 2K and I see LeBron, I'm like, I wonder, like, is there a scenario where a guy with that build wouldn't be successful in the NBA? And that kind of applies to DK Metcalf, where, like, I do think he will obviously be a top 5 receiver in his NFL career unless something really bad happens, because someone with that build and that speed, that athleticism is obviously going to be top 5. But right now, no. I think it's way too premature to call him top 5 receiver, especially with how talented the receivers are in the NFL to today. I'm not even sure if I can call him a top 10 receiver, and I'm not even sure if I can call him a top 10 receiver or the best receiver in his draft class from 2 years ago, as Terry McLaurin, I think, is a more skilled wide receiver than DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf obviously has more dominance when it comes to statistically, because that's one of my main arguments for why he is not a top 5 or maybe even a top 10 receiver, is because he has the front runner possibly in the MVP race throwing him a football every single game. And he also has Tyler Lockett out there with him so that he's not getting like double coverage every game from the 2 best corners on the other team. But speaking of good corners, just before I get into statistics, you look at a guy like Jalen Ramsey. You look at the Rams-Seahawks game last game. No catches. I think he had a couple targets, but no catches for DK Metcalf. He got shut down. He got absolutely embarrassed by Jalen Ramsey. We thought it was going to be a pretty cool matchup, but DK couldn't get anything to go. He couldn't create any separation. because his route running is pretty lackluster. But before I let Isaac say something about this, I'm just going to name the receivers and then I'll explain it later that are better than DK Metcalf right now. There are more than what I'm going to say, but these are the primary guys that can't have him in that conversation. Julio Jones, Michael Thomas. This is in no order. Julio Jones, Michael Thomas, DeAndre Hopkins, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, and Keenan Allen. Those are the guys that keep him out of the conversation. There's more that I think are better than him, like Allen Robinson. But before I talk about that, Isaac, what do you have to say about this?
Yeah, I agree with you, Ben. I think he'll get there later in his career, but at this point, he's just not there yet. And also, that's a good point. Like other players who are higher up than him as a wide receiver don't have as good quarterbacks. When you have like a player who we've talked about as one of the front runners in the MVP race right now in Russell Wilson throwing to you, of course your stats are going to be better. And also his yards per game are not as good as a lot of the guys you name, like Devontae Adams. Like it's just not as good. And his receiving is also not as good. And I think when you add that to the fact that he's in a really good offensive team right now, they're the number 1 rated offensive team in the NFL, and you've got an incredible quarterback thrown to you. In your second year, it's way premature to say he's top 5 in the league, but he'll get there later on. But
the fact that he's even doing this in the second year is really impressive. But jumping to the conclusions that he is a top 5 receiver are the things that are going to get him hated later on his career for being overrated. And I think he is currently overrated because people are putting him in that conversation. But of course, like Isaac said, and this is something that I've said before, is that having the great quarterback and having a great offense, it just brings so much pressure off of DK Metcalf, where his route running is not that great. You can see he doesn't create that much separation, but of course, no little cornerback is going to jump up and snag something over DK Metcalf. But when you look at DK Metcalf, he is on track for 11 drops this season, which would lead the league last season in the total drops that happened last season. He would have led the league in drops last season. That's not good. That's not him being a bad receiver. That's him being a young receiver that keeps him out of that race. But reasons that he's better than those other receivers. Actually, Isaac, I know you have some stuff to say about this, but why isn't he better than those top receivers?
Well, yeah, his numbers just straight up aren't as good. Like his receiving grades are much worse. And then if you also look at yards per game, it's also much worse. He's arguably not top 10, like Ben said. I think he's certainly not top 5. Again, very impressive that he's doing this, but you have an incredible quarterback throwing to you in your second year. It's not fair to the other guys to put him up there in top 5.
All right, I'm gonna take over now.
Yeah, Arjun, before I argue you, I need to know what your top 5 is so I can tell you why.
All right, my top 5, I've got Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, I've got Michael Thomas, Tyreek Hill, and then I've got Metcalf at 5. And then I've got 6, Julio Jones, Keenan Allen, Stephon Diggs, and then
Julio Jones.
What? What's wrong with
Jones below him?
He's better than Julio Jones. I'm going to get into that now.
Julio Jones is a top 3 receiver in this league.
No, he's not. Julio Jones is not a top 3 receiver. I'm going to get into that right now. Now, DK Metcalf, you guys want to slander his route running. You want to slander the amount of yards he gets. He has drops. That's because he's young. But first of all, he's got 33 first downs already, 8 touchdowns. He has more total yards than Devontae Adams. He gets 18.3 yards per reception. He has 8 avoided tackles. You want to use his size against him? You shouldn't use his size against him because that's what makes him.
Of course, he gets 18 yards per reception because he has a great coach who's putting him downfield on those routes because he's
you can't say his coach causes that to happen.
It's not his fault. It's not his fault.
I'm gonna keep going. No.
Yards per reception.
No, Ben. No. I'm gonna. First of all, you want to talk about the Jalen Ramsey game? Okay, that was a bad game. I admit that was a bad game for him. But let's take the 49ers game when he was put up against the number 2 ranked cornerback in Jason Brett, who allows only 4.7 fantasy points. That day, DK Metcalf had 35 fantasy points. He had 166 yards. He had 2 touchdowns, and he had an insane game. He's played against good defenses. I get that the 49ers have injuries on their team. Okay, Now,
No. The fact
if you-
that
you
you're
can route run,
the
you can route
fact
run
that you're
any
bringing
kind of route.
fantasy
You run
points into this
comebacks,
is
you run
disgusting.
sweet spots and slants and verticals. In the stats, I'm not going to base my whole argument off of stats, but if you look at the stats, DK Metcalf, only person who rivals the stats that DK Metcalf has is Devontae Adams. Does that mean I think he's better than all those other guys? No. But DK Metcalf has proved that. I mean, okay, I'm going to give one more point.
No.
Andre Hopkins is on track for 166 targets in this season. If DK Metcalf got 166 receptions based on the amount of yards he gets as a second-year player, he'd be the second in all-time yards in a season behind Calvin Johnson.
He's not going to do that. No. Okay, you have said some of the most disrespectful words I've heard you say on this podcast, and you said that Julio Jones not only is not better than DK Metcalf at this point in his career, not only is he not better than Tyreek Hill at this point in his career, but he's not top 5. He's a top 3 receiver in this league, and you can't say anything else. Anything else besides that is purely disrespectful. Julio Jones, he might not be the physical specimen that DK Metcalf is, but he's still a physical specimen. He's in arguments for some of the greatest receivers the NFL's ever seen. But if you
that was his prime.
No. You've had your turn to say something, and the things you said have made me very much question your football knowledge. But since you wanted to base things off stats, let's talk about stats. Let's talk about drops. Julio Jones does not have a drop this season. You know who is on track to lead the league in drops? DK Metcalf. You want to know who has 16% higher catch percentage than DK Metcalf? Julio Jones. You want to talk about whose quarterback has a higher quarterback rating when throwing to them? You talk about Julio Jones. You can't use total yards, especially against a guy like Julio Jones who has missed games this season. He has more targets than DK Metcalf, more yards per game, more yards per target. And all of these stats come from the fact that he's not near the level of Julio Jones. You can't possibly.
He is. He's better than Julio. You're using misleading stats. Misleading stats. First of all,
stats talk about total stats and yards down.
I never used the total stats. I said that he had total stats more than Devontae Adams. I never talked about him having more total yards than than Julio Jones. I never said that.
You just can't say that he's better than Julio Jones, not only from a statistical standpoint, but also not from a basic human knowledge standpoint. Nobody has ever said that. DK Metcalf's mom doesn't even think.
Plenty of people, if you watch the videos that of First Take, everybody said that.
No, Julio Jones is thrown the ball by Matt Ryan, who's one hell of a quarterback, but it's not Russell Wilson. Everything goes towards Julio Jones. He has a far worse coaching situation. He has a far worse surrounding receiver core. So every best corner on the team guards Julio Jones at all times, especially with Calvin Ridley injured. And then you look at the fact that, DK Metcalf is in a system with Tyler Lockett on the other side of the field, who's arguably better than DK Metcalf. I think he's a better receiver than DK Metcalf. But
why are you saying stuff like that? Okay, why would you
say the corners to pay attention to? You have Chris Carson when healthy in the backfield. You have who can take the ball away and have DK Metcalf just be a blocker that whole game. And
but he's been injured for the entire season. He's been
throwing in the ball, and you're going to tell me that he is better than Julio Jones?
Ben, I'm gonna tell you why you're wrong. Because first of all, the Seahawks have had their fair share of problems, and it's amazing they're 6-2. But they have a terrible secondary. Their defense is so poor. Besides Bobby Wagner, but their running backs have all been injured. So if anything, the 10 people have had. You've seen multiple people having to guard DK Metcalf. There are only 2 weapons on that team. They've got Lockett and they've got Metcalf. Now, Ben, just as you were slandering Russell Wilson, you're telling me that he was an MVP front runner?
He's arguably, to a lot of people, still the MVP front runner. He's still up there. He's playing poorly right now, but he's still one of the top quarterbacks, the second best quarterback in the league right now, in my opinion. But when you look at it, Julio Jones is just so much better than DK Metcalf. There's not any sort of argument. And you talked about weapons. You talked about the running backs, you talk about the secondary. Every game the Seahawks go into, it is a shootout, which means DK Metcalf probably has double the possessions of anybody else in the NFL when he's on the Seahawks, because the Seahawks have the ball in offense so much. I mean, I don't even know if there is a statistic for it, but if there is, the Seahawks probably lead the league in offensive possessions because they always have the damn ball because, I mean, the other team scores in 5 seconds. They're always throwing downfield. They always need a high-paced game, and they're always throwing downfield to D.K Metcalf. And you just simply can't use statistics or anything.
I'm gonna wrap up my argument. I know Isaac hasn't spoken well, but I'm just gonna say one last thing. I just think it's atrocious that you're using his size against him because, I mean, if you look at it, he can run comebacks, he can run streaks. You look at Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas runs like 20,000 slants in a season. That's he's a great receiver.
Isaac, I'm sorry, Isaac. I just have
to. Ben is totally right. I think it's not even fair to compare them. Like it's really not.
You're comparing DK Metcalf, and I mean, like, dude.
Also, Matt Ryan is not comparable. Ryan is not comparable to Russell.
I mean, you're comparing a guy, and DK Metcalf. I love DK Metcalf. He's a great guy, great receiver, but you're doing him wrong comparing him to Julio Jones, one of the best receivers the game has ever seen. There's just no sort of argument for that, and I don't see where you get that from.
But I'm saying it because Julio Jones.
You said Michael Thomas.
It's simple. He's still a top receiver in the league, and I'm saying DK Metcalf's better because just the overall yardage, the overall weapon he is. No cornerback. You can take any cornerback in the league, maybe besides Jalen Ramsey, and he's just gonna body that cornerback. That's why he's so dominant. That's why he's so high on that list. That's why I have him there. You want to talk about pure skill? There's a difference between who's the best receiver and who's the most purely skilled receiver. Metcalf, if you probably reduced his muscle size, if you reduced his size, he wouldn't be as good of a receiver. But that's what makes him so dangerous as an offensive weapon.
Then you talked about Michael Thomas. You brought up the slant boy argument. That is the dumbest shit anybody has ever said to me was the slant boy argument. That the fact that their head coach has him run slants because Drew Brees in the recent years has been lacking in arm strength. And I mean, generally he's been in the league since 2016, but Michael Thomas last year was in arguments for the best receiver in the league. It was him or D-Hop. Back and forth. And then this year, he misses some games due to injury, and bam, he's out of a
I still think he's a top 3 receiver in the league. I never said that he wasn't a top 3 receiver in the league.
He's a top 2 receiver in the league, talking about just how they route run, he's miles ahead of DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf can't.
That's not fair because that's his second year. DK's only in his second year. I'm not saying I said that Thomas is better. The only guy who's saying I'm saying that he's better than Julio Jones and all those other guys besides Hill, Hopkins, Adams, and Thomas. That's all.
Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs is a lot better than DK Metcalf when it comes to being a wide receiver in the NFL. Has one of the least accurate quarterbacks in the league in throwing him the football. That's something you have to talk about. It's the fact that he is a way
Josh Allen.
Josh Allen's not an accurate quarterback. He's
a terrain.
He puts up a ton of great stats, but he's not that great of an accurate quarterback. And then you look at the fact that he is the only weapon on that team. He's getting double and triple coverage almost every time down the field, and he still puts up better numbers than DK Metcalf. But I do want to talk about our next thing we want to talk about since we've been rambling on about this for a while, and that is, which quarterback would you rather have, Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray? Isaac, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, okay. I don't know if this is controversial at all. I'm going to go with Kyler Murray just because I think he's an incredibly young player. He's already shown, people have already compared him to really good quarterbacks. When you look at the fact that he's in his second year, we were just talking about guys in their second year. He's in his second year. First of all, let's just talk about the throw that he just had. People were all talking about an incredible catch, but an incredible throw to be able to scramble to the sidelines and throw an incredible pass in the end zone to win the game. He's showing promises in an incredible quarterback. The fact that we're even comparing him to the league MVP in his second year, or former league MVP from last year in his second year, is incredible. So I'm going with Kyler Murray because if I'm building a team and I want either of those two guys, Kyler Murray at this point is better at throwing, and he's a younger guy and he has more potential at this point. Because if we're even comparing them now in their career, where is he going to go as he develops in his career? So I'm picking Kyler Murray.
All right, June, what do you got to say?
This one, I think you could really go either way. I'd be fine with anybody saying Kyler, anybody saying Lamar. Me personally, I mean, if you look at the stat, Kyler pretty much bodies Lamar in every stat this season. But I'd rather have Lamar Jackson on my team because, I mean, last year, let's look at last year, because last year he was the unanimous MVP. And that was because if you look at the Ravens as a team, they're a defensive centered team. And when Lamar Jackson came in, it's crazy because he changed that. He turned the Ravens into an actual legitimate offensive. He turned them into an offensive weapon. Now, if you look at the receivers that Lamar has right now, the reason why he has, I mean, it's so hard for him to get good stats is because he has Willie Snead. His best receiver is Willie Snead, and they have no vertical threat whatsoever. So when defensive teams play the Ravens, all they need to do is put all their safeties into the box, just stack them into the box, and they can prevent any. If Lamar Jackson wants to run, there are literally safeties right there. I mean, if you put him on a team with their actual weapons, I think that he would be better than Kyler Murray. If you put Kyler Murray in the situation that Lamar is, Kyler would be frustrated with the lack of talent on this team, and he would not be as good as Lamar is.
Okay, yeah, obviously I agree with a lot of stuff you said there because the first thing you said, either way you go, there's really no wrong answer because I mean they're two pretty similar players, but there's like the little things that put each of them above the other one. Like of course Lamar like has probably one of the worst, you could argue, like down with the Jets for receiver cores if he didn't have Andrews at tight end. Like he has a great tight end system there. But other than that, like his receivers, and Hollywood Brown's been terrible in the NFL. He's created no separation. He's been so fast, but he creates no separation. Willie Snead, as you said, that's not a good receiver core. But then when you look at purely just the players and what they've done, like last season, in his rookie season, when Kyler's best weapon, I don't even remember who it was. It was probably like Larry Fitzgerald, Christian Kirk, those guys, because he didn't have DeAndre Hopkins. He put up more passing yards last season than MVP Lamar Jackson. That's why I picked Kyler Murray, is because they're both dual threat quarterbacks. I mean, Kyler Murray has been running this season more than Lamar did in his MVP season. Kyler Murray can run the football. He can do that very well. But when you look at Lamar Jackson can't pass like Kyler Murray can. Kyler Murray passed better than him last year, and he was a rookie with basically no weapons, not Lamar-level weapons. But I think I got to pick Kyler Murray because of just the passing. I think the running is pretty similar. They're both dual-threat quarterbacks, but that's basically all I got to say for this one so far.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Orange June does have a good point, though. I'm not sure how he would be in that system. I think Kyler Murray does have more weapons, and I don't know what's going to happen with Lamar Jackson's future, because it seems like I would be frustrated too when you look at he's the league MVP, but he just doesn't have as many weapons as he would like. So I think I'm still sticking with Kyler Murray, but that is a good point. I'm not sure how he would react in that system that they have with the Ravens.
Ben, if the thing is that Kyler Murray is a terrific passer, but that's what makes that's what makes Lamar Jackson so good. It's the fact that he can not only run so well, but if you run like a blitz on him to prevent the running, he's going to hurt you from the passing. He's still a terrific passer. And the way I see it, I mean, Larry Fitzgerald might not be in his prime anymore, but he once upon a time, he was one hell of a receiver. And I had this insane stat that I found the other day where DeAndre Hopkins has not missed an on-target. He has not dropped an on-target pass since 2018.
Yeah, I mean, Larry Fitzgerald, I'm a Panthers fan. We're not making the playoffs. I really hope the Cardinals win the Super Bowl because I want to see Larry Fitz win a ring before he retires. Larry Fitzgerald has been one hell of a player for his career. But when you look at, obviously, he has better weapons. That's why you can really go either way. If these guys both had equally as great or equally as bad receiver cores, then you could easily say it's Kyler Murray. Because, like, if Lamar is playing this bad that he's played this season, he's not playing terrible. But, like, if he's playing the way he is with no receivers, then that's okay. But, like, if he was playing this way with DeAndre Hopkins, that wouldn't be acceptable as a quarterback. But also, like, we've talked about this in our first ever time we talked about football on this show. I talked about the fact that Lamar Jackson has historically never been a very accurate quarterback when it comes to throwing. Of course, his legs beat out everything else. You can't question anything about his game because of how dominant he is running and throwing, but he's not that accurate. He can't really throw that well downfield, and Kyler Murray, I mean, as Isaac said, you saw that throw. Everyone saw that throw. That was beautiful. And I mean, he hiked the ball. He had to weave through like 8 people, 8 linemen, and then he threw that ball down there. He was like, fuck it. D Hop's down there in the end zone somewhere.
I think he retweeted that. He actually tweeted that.
Yeah, but anyways, that is it for this that I want to talk about. I do want to talk about the Bears' current situation and their quarterback situation. And do you guys think that the Bears should consider starting Trubisky over Foles? Arjun, what do you think about this?
I know I'm a UNC fan, so Trubisky, when he got drafted second, I was like, what the hell? How? Trubisky, he's an extremely athletic quarterback, but when you watch how this team performed with either quarterback, I mean, let's look at Foles. Foles is a higher overall completion rate, and under pressure, Foles is just better with passing. Now, under pressure, Trubisky has the running game. He's a better runner than Foles. That's what I think would separate Trubisky from Foles. But under pressure, Foles is 18 for 30 with 4 sacks, and Trubisky under pressure is 3 for 13 with 7 sacks. And if you look at the timing, Foles takes overall, he takes less time to throw. And with the situation the Bears are in right now, they're in a good situation. You have a good receiver in Allen Robinson. You have a good defense. And really, the way you see it is that Trubisky is more of an aggressive, trigger-happy thrower that's going to cost you turn. He's just a trigger-happy guy who's going to throw it recklessly. Foles, you might be more conservative, but with the way the Bears are playing right now, I'd stick with Foles, as he is a former champion.
So I think this is another one where you can really go either way. And I mean, also just an honorable mention. When I was researching all this, I saw that Nick Foles is 6'6", 240. I didn't know how much of a unit that man was. But anyways, that's besides the point. I think that when it comes down to it, Nick Foles brings the consistency that I always talk about in my Super Bowl philosophy. That's like, you just need a quarterback that won't fuck up. And like, generally Nick Foles doesn't do that. That's why they won that Super Bowl, was you just don't need a great quarterback, but you just need that consistency. But when it goes down to it, it's an old guy and a young guy. And the young guy, Mitch Trubisky, he is very trigger happy, as you said. That's the risk of him, is that he's a very big boomer bust guy. But when you look at him, these guys are equally as bad this season. Nick Foles, the not fucking up thing, he has fucked up a lot this season. He's had a pretty bad season when it comes to playing football. But when you look at Trubisky, they were 3-0 with him, and he wasn't playing great. He threw 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. But when he played, they were 3-0, and he has the upside that Nick Foles doesn't. That's why I'm picking him, is because when they had Trubisky, of course, Trubisky was playing just as bad as Foles is, but he's 26 years old. He still has a lot of years ahead of him. And 2 years ago, when this team was 10-6 and one double doinked field goal from Cody Parkey away from moving on to the playoffs against those Eagles that had Nick Foles, I mean, Trubisky was leading that team to a 10-6 record. He was a Pro Bowler that year, for God's sakes. I mean, he threw 24 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. He has the upside. It might not be that much of an upside, but when you compare him to Nick Foles, these guys playing equally as bad as they are right now, I think you have to go with Trubisky, because also this team's on a very downward trajectory. They started off very strong, but ever since, I mean, Foles hasn't been great. The team hasn't been playing great. I mean, you have Allen Robinson, who's arguably one of the best receivers in the league. He hasn't been getting the ball because of Nick Foles' poor quarterback play. But I think you have to give the job to Trubisky because he has the upside that Foles doesn't. But Isaac, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you're comparing an older guy with incredible experience in the Super Bowl. Also, Nick Foles wasn't just a game manager in the Super Bowl. He had an incredible performance then too.
I was there.
We haven't necessarily seen that this year. I mean, I think either way, I think you as a team, you need to have some faith in the quarterback that you sign. You sign Foles knowing that you have Trubisky there. I think at a certain point, it seemed disrespectful to him and to your organization that signed him to put Trubisky over him, even though you had him starting at the beginning of the season. I wouldn't be mad because it looks like he has slightly better numbers than Foles at this point, but I'm going to stick with Foles. He is better. He is much more experienced. He's an older player. And if you have a guy like Mitchell Trubisky waiting to come in later in his career, or even just in the next couple of years, next year, maybe even later in the season to come in for him, that could be a good learning experience for him. But you have to have faith in the player that you sign. Why are you signing?
I mean, generally, I think that goes both ways. That's a good analogy. They do need to have full, because they did sign him to a pretty good contract. But you have to keep that same energy with Trubisky. They drafted him second in 2017 or 2018. I can't remember. They drafted him second, and I mean, of course, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, those guys were there. He's nowhere near those guys, obviously. But when you look at you have to give the faith in him. But I do have a stat for you guys. I don't have that many stats. I just have this one stat, and it's that in his 8 games he has started this season, Nick Foles has not had a passer rating, according to Pro Football Reference, above 100. He's had all in the 90s as his top passer ratings. He's had ones in the 60s and the 70s. Mr. Trubisky in his 3 starts against the Lions, he did have one passer rating above 100. He has already shown that upside. He had 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He's had 2 good game, like a good game and an average below like subpar game this season. Like, of course, he doesn't bring that consistency. And of course, Foles is kind of like the make the conservative pass guy. He's not going to take the big risk unless you really need him to. But Trubisky, he does take those risks. But I feel like at this point, when you're fighting for a playoff spot and the current situation you're in isn't working, you need to switch it up so that Trubisky could possibly, his risk-taking downfield to Allen Robinson could possibly turn this team around, because they're really in a bad place right now, and they're still trying to compete for this playoff spot since they did trade away a good bit of draft compensation to get this defense together.
Yeah.
All right. So I mean, yeah, you go the way. What I see is that you definitely want to start Trubisky next season, but I think the villain in this situation, the real guy we need to blame, and I think Bears fans will agree with me, is Matt Nagy.
Yes,
that guy has failed with the development of Trubisky, because if you put a good coach with Trubisky, you could have developed him. He did a terrible job developing him. I think looking for the future, you want to start Trubisky in the future. Right now, I mean, it just depends. If you want to experiment with Trubisky and hell, it ends up working, then start Trubisky. But at this point, just do what's going to be best for your team right now. But for the future, look towards Trubisky.
Yeah, let's move on to our next thing we want to talk about, and that is, will Seattle make the playoffs despite Russell Wilson and the secondary's issues as of recently? Actually, I want to start this one off. I'll just keep it straight. Like, I'm never, ever in my life, even when he's 50 years old, if he was still playing, I would never bet against Russell Wilson to make the playoffs or into anything, basically. Russell Wilson has wowed me every year of his career. When he transferred from NC State to Wisconsin, he's never disappointed. He's always been that guy. So I will never, even with how bad the secondary is, and I mean, I take back everything I said about them being a contending team. They're not going to contend for a championship if they do sneak into a playoff spot. But I'm not going to bet against Russell Wilson. I mean, he's been playing terribly recently. There's no cutting it short. There's no saying anything else. In his past 2-3 games, he's been playing really bad football, and he's played decent defenses, but he's been playing bad football, especially for a guy who's supposed to be the MVP this year. And I mean, for this team to win football games, he can't have a bad game. They're not going to win a game if he has a bad game, because that secondary, it's a shootout every game. I've heard a lot of people say this before, is that he needs to have a good game or else they can't win football games, because Russell Wilson is that offense. And if they don't score, then that secondary is going to let up points. But one more thing I do want to talk about before I hand it off to you guys is that when this team does have Chris Carson, this is another reason I won't bet against them to make the playoffs, but I'm not sure if they'll make the playoffs, is that Chris Carson, their running back, he's been injured for the past couple of games. With him, in I think the past 3 years, they're 27-2, and they've had a detrimental record without him. He's a very big point to this offense because he takes away from the having to just guard the passing game when they're on the field. But anyways, Arjun, what do you think?
I think if you added Chris Carson, yeah, that would be huge for them. But I found something on the internet where it does a probability right now. With the way Russell Wilson's playing, he's gonna mess up, because he's gonna mess up in the games they have coming up, because they have 3 easy games. They're playing the Giants, the Jets, and the Eagles. Now they're gonna be playing the Rams again and the Cardinals. These are 2 really good teams. It honestly all depends on Russell Wilson, because with the way you see it, he's pretty much the backbone. He is there. He is carrying this team right now. So I think that they're probably going to make the playoffs. I think most likely they're going to be a wild card. And yeah, I think that it just all depends on the way Russell Wilson plays. If Chris Carson comes back, I'm not sure. I haven't checked.
And before we ask Isaac about this, I just want to say one more thing for context, is that if you think we're just talking about the Seahawks randomly not making the playoffs, they are last place in the last wild card position Like they have the last wild card position, but right now they're on a downward spiral, and we don't know if they will make the playoffs. But Isaac, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I also think Russell Wilson has gone through a little bit of a slump. I don't think he's out for QB. Also, Chris Carson is injured. That's a big thing for them. I think they're going to bounce back. Hopefully, their defense can play a little bit better. I do think they're going to make it into the playoffs. I have faith in Russell Wilson, and the Chris Carson injury is like a pretty big deal for them. Like they've been incredible with him earlier this season, but also in the past they've been incredible with him. So I think when you look at I can't imagine that Russell Wilson is going to keep on these couple games that he's played this bad. I think he can even out his MVP in the MVP race, but I think either way they're totally going to make it to the playoffs with him.
On the topic of Seattle defense, I just want to say a quick thing. I really do feel bad for Bobby Wagner. But, I mean, this is like a soap opera. The Seattle defense has been like a soap opera because, I mean, you had Earl Thomas, who they denied him a contract for a very long time. He eventually left. But, I mean, this is a Seattle defense where it's crucial that they step up. But
funny how, like, a couple of years ago, they did have, like, one of, like, the most fun secondaries to ever watch. They had Cam Chancellor, Richard Sherman, and, of course, Earl Thomas. They had a really good secondary. But, exactly. Right now, like, they have two defensive players in Bobby Wagner and Jamal Adams who are like arguably the best in their position, and then the rest is just gone to dirt. Like the rest of their defense is pretty darn terrible. But like obviously it goes down to how Russell Wilson plays, and that's why I said like I won't bet against Russell Wilson, because what are the odds like betting for Russell Wilson to have a good game or for Russell Wilson to have a bad game, especially with the schedule he does have coming up? Like the Cardinals are a good defense. They're not an amazing defense. And then you have the Jaguars, you have the Giants. You have a decent schedule ahead of you, and you're still in that playoff position, which is very important to your team. And you get Chris Carson back soon, hopefully. But I think that this team does make the playoffs, but really it can go either way. It all goes down to the performance of Russell Wilson, and I will never bet against Russell Wilson to have a good game. But anyways, I want to talk about the last thing we do want to talk about today before we go and watch this NBA draft that's happening in 45 minutes from where we're talking about, and that is, which is a bigger threat to make the playoffs and to go deep in the playoffs, the Titans or the Colts? Isaac, what do you have to say about this?
Yeah, I mean, I just quickly, I'm going to go with the Titans. It's close in their division. They're both locked in at 6-3, at 6-3. I just think Derrick Henry has been playing incredibly this year. I mean, he's a beast. And Ryan Tannehill is also putting up really good numbers. He's up there. He's up there with some of the best QBs. You know, it's pretty much defense versus offense at this point. I'm not sure who's going to close out the division, but I'm just going to go with the Titans because those two guys have played incredibly this year. Derrick Henry's looking like one of the best in the league. Ryan Tannehill's putting up really good numbers. So I'm just going to pick the Titans.
Yeah, so I do agree with you, Isaac, and you made a really good point about Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's been arguably in MVP races this year for how good he's played, and he really is the vocal point of the offense, but a lot of people do get it wrong. They do think that he is like the offense itself, and then like if defensive coordinators do think that, and then they'll get beat by Ryan Tannehill, who's arguably put up MVP numbers this year. Obviously, he's not going to win the MVP, but like he's been honored with being in those talks this season. And they also have A.J. Brown. They have good weapons. But as you said, it's offense versus defense. And when I talk about, since they're both like teetering on the edge, I don't think the Titans are currently in the playoffs right now when it comes, because they've lost a couple games in a row. But when it comes to being a bigger threat to make the playoffs, it's obviously the Titans because of their upcoming schedule and with their run offense and, of course, their offense. In the final 4 weeks of the season, according to Pro Football Focus, the Titans play one top 50 run defense. And they're like barely top 50. They barely scrape that line. And they don't play and for the rest of the season, they only play one top 50 defense, and that is the Browns. This team is going to feast that offense. And I mean, that defense is pretty lackluster. They did trade for a good corner, but like when it goes down to it, it's the same with Russell Wilson. I'm not going to bet against Derrick Henry to beat teams like the Jaguars and the Browns and the Giants and the teams that they play, because those are very, very easy matchups, especially defensively. I think they play the Texans too, who are really struggling this year. But yeah, like their final 4 weeks of the season are non-losable games. None of them are losable. And they've been struggling recently, but they've been struggling against teams like the Bears, the Rams, and the undefeated top defense Steelers, but they also beat the Bears. The one bad loss was to the Bengals, and that was their only bad loss of the season. But generally, Arjun, what do you think about this?
You guys know I'm a Titans fan, and I'm a big Derrick Henry fan, but the way I see this, I think you made a good point with the Titans schedule. I think they will make the playoffs, but when I watch their team, the way I see it right now is that the Titans are expecting Derrick Henry to bail them out every game. I mean, he has a monster game, 103 yards, and they still end up losing by a lot to his Colts team. I mean, if you look at the schedule, they've almost lost. Their first 4 wins have been by like 3 points, 1 point, 2 points, 5 points, 7 points. They almost lost to the Broncos. They almost lost to the Jaguars, to the Vikings, who are being single-handedly carried by Dalvin Cook. They have a terrible. Kirk Cousins. They have no receivers, and then we lost to the Bengals. Now, the Bengals have some like sparks in their offense some games, but right now the Titans are in a spot where I'm legitimately worried for them, because right now the Colts, I think, have the best defense in the league. Ooh. I think they're better than the Steelers. I think they might be better than the Steelers. You can go back and forth with this, but the Colts have a damn good defense. Yeah. They have an amazing defense. And Ben, I know you want to slander Phillip Rivers. I know you don't like him, but Phillip Rivers had a really good prime, and I think he's shown sparks of it. I mean, against this Titans team, he showed sparks of that prime. And then this new running back, Hines, I think this offense is getting better. So right now, the Colts are in a better spot than the Titans right now. Will the Titans probably go deeper in the playoffs later on? Maybe. But right now, I just see the Colts as like more of a weapon than the Titans. Right. The Titans need to sort this stuff out.
Carrying on, so the first question is, who's the bigger threat to make it to the playoffs? Obviously, the Colts are in a more comfortable position. I think both these teams will make the playoffs. But speaking about their really good, the Titans' really easy schedule, it will not only help them for the regular season, but it'll really help them for the postseason, because you get this Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill duo running. And you talked about the Colts game and how bad they were. That was a really piss poor receiving game by the Titans. It wasn't even a bad passing game. It was just a really bad receiving game. Like, you saw AJ Brown missed like 2 or 3 easy touchdowns.
Those receivers going to take
and that was very bad. But let's talk about Derrick Henry in the playoffs. Say he gets heated up. Let's talk about last year in the playoffs. Last year in the playoffs, before I get into the statistics of it, he went in, he beat that Tom Brady final, like, season finale. He ended Tom Brady and the Patriots, essentially. He ended that team that's been haunting the NFL forever, and it was all because of Derrick Henry. Like, Ryan Tannehill played good, but he didn't have an essential role. And then you looked at
that point, people were considering Derrick Henry the best running back in the league.
No, and then you look at their next game. They played the Ravens, the red hot MVP Lamar Jackson, great defense, tight end system Ravens, and they sent those Ravens home too. So they essentially sent the greatest quarterback of all time and the current MVP quarterback home. And then they went on and they barely lost to the Chiefs in that final, but of course they weren't going to beat the Chiefs. Nobody was going to beat the Chiefs. Nobody's even going to beat the Chiefs this year, in my opinion. But when you look at the stats of it, in 3 playoff games last season that they played, Derrick Henry put up 446 yards in the playoffs with 2 touchdowns, 5 yards per carry, and 150 yards per game. I mean, seriously, before that, nobody was really talking about him generally. Like, he was just like a good running back in the league. But then, like, after that, people were like, okay, you got to give him the MVP this year. Derrick Henry played absolutely crazy in the playoffs. It's kind of like LeBron James this year, what people were talking about, and Kawhi Leonard with the Raptors in 2019 basketball-wise. But like, Derrick Henry in those playoffs last season were some of the scariest things I've ever seen. Like, I would rather be rolled over by a bulldozer than Derrick Henry open in the field. Like, and that's my thing is, like, if they do get hot going into the playoffs, I could very well expect them to go deep and maybe even try to make a Super Bowl run. Obviously, they're not my favorites, but they could beat teams like the Steelers. They could beat teams like the Colts, like any of those playoff teams. They're not capable of being beaten down in the playoffs. I think they can beat anybody in the NFL. But generally, the Colts are a very good team too. But I think their defense is very good, and that generally pans out for teams in the playoffs, and defense generally beats offense in the playoffs. But when the offense is that piss poor, I don't think I can bet on them to be a better playoff team than the Titans.
With the way they were playing against the Titans, they weren't piss poor. They were rolling. And I think
I'm talking about playoffs.
If they continue that, then they can be a legitimate threat.
Yeah, obviously they can be a threat, but obviously, as you said, I'm scared about Phillip Rivers. I don't know how good he will be for the rest of the season. I don't know if he will be, and I mean, he hasn't even been that good this season. He's been basically just as good as Nick Foles has for the Bears, and he used to be very good, but he's not showing that much anymore. Obviously, he's not like a bottom feeder quarterback, but he's not ideal. And T.Y. Hilton has been really disappointing. I mean, Hines has been very good, but generally that team's very good. I have nothing else to say for this, and if you guys are down with it, I think we got to go get our draft party on. When you're watching this, we would have already done this, but we will be live streaming the draft on Instagram, and then when this comes out, there will also be a draft day special coming out talking about the draft. But anyways, before we go, make sure if you haven't already, if you're still watching, make sure to leave a like, make sure to subscribe just to support us.
If you're still watching, you guys are legends.
Yeah, you're a legend. But then also get your merch. It's on under here. I can't really show it under my Hornets jersey, but I'm predicting it right now. We're going to pick LaMelo Ball. Anthony Edwards thinks he's a rapper. But anyways, that'll be it for us today. And peace.